Aliens serving can't say that at the start of a YouTube video. No cussing allowed in the first few seconds. They get mad. We'll come back to that in a minute. In the meantime, what is all this? I'm Quadra. I design games and RPG adventures and tabletop terrain stuff, and I have a site, Paradiso.zone, where all that lives. And I have a bunch of amazing people who support my work through memberships on that site. You should become one of them. They keep me going, first and foremost, and they get rewards. One thing I do for the companions, the people who give the most, is this. I make a little tabletop statue in their honor, as thanks for their support. It'll live on as terrain in the great city of Ozma and in future videos. And I even make a video about making it. Usually they're members only, but some, like this one, are for everyone. So, once they've been around for a while and I get the time, I email them asking for 3 words to inspire the statue. And I build them, earliest member to newest. And this is the second for LauraDernLabubu, who is also my wonderful girlfriend, and who is so supportive of all the weird stuff I do. She's just the best. I swear the next one will be for someone I don't know personally. So the 3 words they send can be anything, really. Several opted to give me a 3-word phrase. This is one of them. Aliens serving cunt. I loved figuring out what that should look like. But it occurs to me this video is for a tabletop games audience, and I don't know how big the overlap is between people who play tabletop games and people who know what serving cunt means. But then again,
I want to see what 2 trans girls do behind closed doors. It's fucking Warhammer!
So, who's to say? But if you don't know, serving cunt comes from ballroom culture, which is a Black and Latino LGBT scene that is upstream of just so much popular culture and language. It's crazy. It's way too big a topic for me to do it any justice here, but if you'd like to know more, give the docs Paris is Burning or How Do I Look a watch. The FX show Pose was also set in that world. So, serving cunt, one of the many terms to come out of ballroom, has special significance among drag queens and trans women in particular, because serving is like performing, but in a very confident, bold, embodied way. And cunt is metonymy, basically, for femininity. Maybe exaggerated, extreme, or campy, but certainly unapologetic and sexy, and perhaps, as the word implies, vulgar to mainstream tastes. Put it all together, and we have serving cunt, a bold, defiant, even, performance of femininity. Not to get all Judith Butler on you in a tabletop crafting video, but hey. So, aliens serving cunt. At first, I was thinking I could maybe find some feminine space alien minis online I could 3D print, but nothing I found quite had the vibe, you know? I found some Twi'leks and Tau and even a few H.R. Giger's xenomorphs with boobs, but I don't know, they just didn't have the strut. They weren't cunty enough. So then I started wondering, what are the cuntiest minis out there? And I realized I knew the answer. Demonettes of Slaanesh. Specifically the Juan Diaz ones from the 90s. They're from the Warhammer universe, and in that lore, they're servants of Slaanesh, an evil chaos god, known as the Prince of Pleasure and She Who Thirsts. Already some interesting gender stuff going on there, but we can leave the theorycraft of how Games Workshop links that queer coding to an evil god of depravity, decadence, and excess to someone else. And we can run with our own interpretations. After all, this statue doesn't live in that world. But there's a problem. The Juan Diaz minis are old, popular, and out of print, which means they're very expensive on eBay, like $400 for the box. There are cheaper, more modern demonettes, but they just don't have the same panache. However, this did give me something new to look for online, and it turns out a lot of people have made their own takes on demonettes, a lot of them obviously inspired by the Juan Diaz sculpts. And as an aside, wow, there are a lot of people making very horny minis out there. And I will say, the demonette knockoffs I found ranged from kinda dopey to overly pornographic, but somewhere in the mix, I found a set that got pretty close to what I was looking for. So what I'm putting together here are a few from that set, called Demon Damsels, by Ketaminis. These have some modularity, which is nice, and some of them have these walking poses, which give this perfect kind of runway strut. These ladies should be wowing the judges, you know? And the prompt is aliens, so I can't have just one. So the statue will have a pair. But what's the relationship gonna be to each other? Well, there's just so many ways you could go with this, but I'd just like it to be supportive, you know? Like, you can go out there and be as fierce as you like, but you don't want to go it alone. Someone's got to have your back. So these aliens, demons, whatever, outsiders, they're walking side by side, their arms facing out and in vicious claws. But between the two of them, something more tender. They'll be holding hands as they walk. So to do this, I've glued them together at the elbow and have added a bit of wire as a tiny armature for where their lower arms connect. And onto that, I add more epoxy putty. As usual, a mix of green stuff and milliput. Making the arms wasn't too bad, but the hands took quite a few attempts. Most of which I've excised from this video because watching me cut tiny hands out of putty over and over, you don't need that. This method kinda worked, but I kept making the hands too big and then destroying them anyway because the putty was too soft. So eventually I went with pure green stuff, mostly just shaping it in situ instead of trying to make hands separately and then sticking them on. Green stuff on its own is more resilient and less mushy than a mix with milliput, and it ended up giving me better results. It's not perfect, but hey, live and learn. For our base, I'm using good old XPS foam scraps. Each of these statues is going to have a 1-inch square footprint, and within that I can play around with shapes. And here's a fun new technique. Wear a mask, and be careful, fire is hot, fumes are toxic. I can use this sculpting tool like hot wire to get some nice fluting in the foam, all the way around, except for the front, which will get the name, first in pencil, LauraDernLabubu, which I deepen with a knife. It's real fiddly work getting this many letters on here. And a third time, once again with pencil, to widen the knife cuts a bit. I start putting this together. Normally I'm not one to cut corners, but I get the top on and a little more detailing, and we're ready to put it all together. I've stuck little bits of wire in their feet to make a more secure connection to the foam base, which I just use PVA glue for. Hot glue would be quicker, but it's too messy, and when the connection's dry, I give everything a thinned down coat of Mod Podge and black paint as a combination sealer and primer. And we can move on to the painting process. I use an airbrush to lay down base colors and some broad shading and highlighting. The base gets a flesh tone base coat, which I shade by mixing in some brown and purple, and highlight by mixing in some white and azure blue to get a kind of warm limestone look that matches the city terrain I make. And then the statue itself is more of a white marble. I get into the crevices with a darker mix of brown and purple to help define these shapes, and I take extra special care with the lettering. I really want this to be legible. And then, lovely, lovely edge highlights, using a brighter version of that flesh white and azure blue mix to really define the shape of the base. Again, taking extra care when doing the lettering, I use sharp contrast of light and dark paint to make these cuts look cleaner than they really are. As with the previous statue I made for Galen, I found that after applying the white coat to the minis, there were some seams and layer lines that were a bit too visible. So I mixed up some ultrafine milliput and thinned it with water to use as slip to fill gaps. Ideally I would have done this before paint, but since the stone is meant to be white anyway, it's not that big a deal. I'm gonna make some of these little bumps into moss with green paint. I like having a good amount of plant life crawling over everything. And some mottled white and gray paint to blend in that milliput. Now to add some weathering and shading and generally help the details on the models stand out. I drip some black wash on them, which is just thinned down black paint, and then I go back over the stone with some nice white highlighting, picking out details and raised areas, like those cheeks. I want all the statues to have at least one gold element. For this one, I've decided it's going to be the claws, so I go over them with a new coat of black paint, which gives me a nice base for this metallic gold, which I build up over a few layers. And finally, I finish each statue off by writing the words I was given on the bottom, where I've also stuck a magnet, by the way. I use an extra fine white Posca paint marker for this, and that serving did not come out well. So I paint over it with some more black Mod Podge and lay down a bit of paper and more black podge to seal it. This makes for a smoother surface where the magnet is. It's nicer to write on. And that's much better. And with a little varnish to seal everything in, here they are, strutting their stuff. Alien serving cunt. Thank you again to my dear LauraDernLabubu for your unwavering support, kindness, enthusiasm, for everything. And thank you to all the rest of my supporters at PartySo.zone and on YouTube. Together, you make all the stuff I do possible. Thank you so much. It means the world to me that I get to do this. If you enjoyed this video, you should like it, leave a comment, subscribe. It all helps. And if you want to help even more, head to my website, PartySo.zone, and become a member. You can get my newsletter for free, and you can become an ongoing supporter to help me keep making things. That'd be great. And if you become a companion member, you'll get to send me some weird words to make a statue out of. So that's fun. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.